The final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 9518 in the name of Alison Johnston on fan ownership of football clubs. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I invite those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible, please. I now call on Alison Johnston to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many thanks to the MSPs who have supported my motion and to those contributing tonight, including the new Cabinet Secretary. Congratulations on your promotion. I would like first to say this opportunity for members' business was meant to be Margot MacDonald's, and I don't know what relevant, incisive topic Margot would have brought to be debated, but as an advocate for sport her whole life and a loyal Hibs fan, I hope and trust she's content with my choice today. I imagine there are football clubs important to each and every MSP's region. Some can claim the biggest, most successful clubs, others will be equally supportive of smaller clubs or amateur teams. And some MSPs I know even dare to support a team outside of their region. But the point is that football is important to Scotland, and our clubs are often at the core of our communities. Football clubs provide excitement and drama and a sense of belonging that people care passionately about. But I've seen too many Scottish football fans go through painful cycles of boom and bust at their clubs, and I don't mean in terms of sporting success, that's par for the course, but financially. And in response to these money woes and instability, the exciting, though to be honest not so new idea that the supporters of a football club should own the football club is coming back into vogue. And I'm delighted to congratulate Hearts of Midlothian and all the fans and supporters in my region who have demonstrated the power of this idea so dramatically. It literally has been fans digging deep into their pockets who have kept this club afloat, and the hard work of many to bring the deals with shareholders to a close. Hearts aren't yet out of administration, but most of the river has been crossed. We can look forward to building stronger foundations for the future. Chairwoman-elect Anne Budge has ushered in a new era for Hearts to become the biggest fan-owned club in the country. And certainly.
I congratulate the member on the debate and what she's saying. I wonder if she'd agree that it would be a good route for clubs to go down, as Clyde have done, who are fan-owned, to have no debt built into their constitution so they cannot borrow.
That is certainly, that sounds like a sustainable and sensible model, and certainly will be an issue that will be looked at, not least, of course, by the body that the Minister will no doubt, the Cabinet Secretary will no doubt tell us about in the course of the debate. Annan Athletic, Ayr United and Motherwell are all progressing in the same direction, with plans to be community-owned by the start of the 2014-15 season. Clyde FC, East Stirling, Stirling Albion and Dunfermline Athletic are already enjoying majority ownership by supporters. Livingston FC announced only last week their desire to join this club. And it's important to counter any negativity that supporter ownership can't be done. This model is the norm for clubs in Scandinavia and Germany. In fact, last year's UEFA Championships League Cup final was between Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich, both community-owned. In Scotland, individual supporters' trusts and community interest companies, Scottish Fans and Supporters Direct Scotland have all worked hard to demonstrate that supporters can be the most responsible and successful owners for their clubs in the long term. With ambition and vision from the Scottish Government and the SPFL, I believe supporters have the chance to put more Scottish football clubs on a sound, more stable and successful footing. The Scottish Greens are proposing support for more community ownership. I recently had what I hope was a productive meeting with the Cabinet Secretary for Sport and the Minister for Local Government, where we discussed a range of options that could be used. This idea fits squarely within the Community Empowerment Agenda. The Community Empowerment Bill to be introduced to Parliament provides an opportunity to support genuine fans' trusts who are bringing forward serious, sustainable business models for their clubs. When supporter ownership has come about, it's generally been during financial crisis and against a backdrop of debt and failure. And there's a need to make sure there's a route for community ownership that doesn't involve a crisis of financial governance. In many countries, sports teams have a dedicated legal form which can allow supporters the right to influence this governance. The power to define corporate vehicles lies with Westminster, so that option is not available to us at present, and neither is the power to alter insolvency arrangements. But we do have the opportunity to build on the community right to buy enshrined in the Land Reform Scotland Act 2003, and which the Government proposed to extend to urban areas. This right to buy is based on the idea that land may be bought from landowners when it's demonstrated to be clearly in the public interest to do so. For our football clubs owned by transient or absentee masters, many of the same public interest arguments apply. Most clubs have dedicated, committed owners, but could still benefit from greater community ownership and involvement to ensure the long-term success is the ultimate goal. And there are plenty of options available: a right for fans to buy at the point of sale, or a fan's right to a say when a clubs are sold or go into administration. And this could incentivise potential buyers to offer fans trust shares or seats on the board. A right to buy at an independently assessed price at any time, or a right to buy a proportion of shares when fans can't or don't want to own the whole club. Scottish Greens released the results of polling today, which demonstrates massive support. Of those who had a view, 72% of people supported a fan's right to buy their clubs at any time, and an even larger 87% of people supported a fan's right to buy at point of sale. These rights could be enabled through legislative amendments that broaden our understanding of community assets from just land and physical assets to other assets with significant common good. The most straightforward way for progress to be made on supporting fan ownership would be if the sports governing bodies were to enshrine them within the terms of their membership codes. And I'm sure many would warmly welcome any moves the SPFL and SFA make towards supporting fans with solid business models. And government financial support can also provide the opportunity for successful models to flourish. But our proposals provide something as important as money to fans looking to take over clubs: belief and opportunity. These proposals create a great goal-scoring opportunity for all those fans who want to do the work to take it, and I hope the Cabinet Secretary can offer those fans, clubs and communities firm support. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call on Patricia Ferguson to be followed by Chick Brodie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and may I first of all congratulate Alison Johnson on securing this members' debate, which focuses the Chamber's attention on a matter of significant importance with regard to the future of Scotland's national game. And can I too congratulate Shona Robison on her elevation to the Cabinet. I have to say it's long overdue in my view. It's a long time since sport was at the Cabinet table, so I'm particularly pleased that Ms Robison has that position, and I'm sure she'll use it very wisely indeed. As a member of the Cooperative Party, I fully endorse the approach adopted by an increasing number of fans and communities where they back the ownership of football fans by supporters' trusts. Indeed, it's often a point of some pride to those of us in the cooperative movement that one of the most successful football clubs in the world, Barcelona, is in fact a cooperative. Doesn't seem to have done them any harm. And I welcome very much the most recent manifestation of fans acting collectively to take control of what should be a community asset. That is to be found in the Edinburgh-based Foundation of Hearts. And as a Partick Thistle and Glasgow City supporter, I wish them all the best and recognise the hard work and commitment that has got them to this point. I was proud a long time ago now to be part of the Labour-led government which supported the establishment of Supporters Direct Scotland in 2002, an organisation which was set up with the express aim of, and I quote, promoting sustainable spectator sports clubs based on supporters' involvement and community ownership. And during the 12 years of its existence, Supporters Direct Scotland has worked with fans across the country to establish over 30 supporters' trusts in Scotland, 18 of which have a director on the board of their club, and 5 of which have majority control or own their club outright. I believe that with the significant challenges faced by so many clubs in the present time, the course set by Supporters Direct Scotland is one that will be seen as increasingly attractive. Presiding Officer, in the time remaining to me, I'd like to bring to the Chamber's attention one of the ways in which clubs that have taken a community-orientated approach can cooperate imaginatively with other agencies to support people who live in their neighbourhoods. Citizens Advice Scotland's campaign on payday, high street and doorstep lending works closely with a number of football clubs. Supporters and their families are encouraged to seek help and advice with debt and other financial issues. The initiative is built on the belief that football clubs, like bureaus, are rooted in their local communities. At the moment, both the Dumfries and Galloway Citizens Advice Service and Nairn CAB have partnered with their local football clubs, Annan Athletic and Nairn County Football Club. I believe that several more such partnerships are in the pipeline and will be announced throughout 2014. Now, in the case of Annan Athletic, which is of particular interest to my colleague here, Elaine Murray, a club moving towards community ownership, it puts the community at the heart of its operation, from exercise and social clubs for senior citizens to free pitch access for young people. The club launched its community project at a recent fixture with Peterhead, where 500 themed flyers directing supporters to their local CAB for advice were distributed to fans, and a pop-up advice hall was set up in the club bar. Additionally, television, web and newspaper coverage for the day was widespread. And the partnership between the club and the CAB will, I'm certain, endure with future link-ups already planned. Similarly, Nairn County and Nairn CAB have targeted the 25 to 35-year-old male audience, which CAB sometimes struggle to capture. The demographic most likely, ironically, to face issues having taken out a payday loan. Now, these imaginative initiatives show clearly that football clubs which are community-centred can relate to the needs and aspirations of their locality much more readily than those based on a traditional model. I commend such initiatives, and I very much look forward to fans having an increasing say in and control over their club's future as we go forward.
Many thanks. Now call on Chick Brodie to be followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. May I also welcome the debate brought by Alison Johnson and congratulate the former Minister, who now is our Cabinet Secretary for Sport. Presiding Officer, football belongs to its fans, or at least should belong to its fans. The erosion of the game is manifest, regrettably, by reduced general participation of amateur players and fans. I used to play football, playing football at school in the morning and playing for Downfield Juniors in Dundee, and then I would run home to hear Dundee's result that Saturday. And with apologies to the Cabinet Secretary, there are two teams in Dundee. There's Dundee and Dundee Reserves. I was but one of thousands who played and paid, and regrettably the game has now been riven by dissension and poor management. Dissension, as is clear today, in yet another debilitating conflict between the SPFL and the SFA. There should be one, in my opinion, one overarching body responsible for Scottish football, and that body should include fan representation. Poor management, in the case of some, just because of poor management with their clubs, despite having their clubs at heart, and in the case of more and larger clubs, what appears to be management through unadulterated power and money. In the recent past, Presiding Officer, Dundee twice, Airdrie, Rangers, Hearts have been in or have been facing liquidation. 2.5 years ago, I had an approach to give my previous history by one of the trusts of Rangers, asking for help to see if there was anything that might be done to help them. I said I wouldn't help directly, but suggested that they might consider they had 60,000 fans. If they paid an average of £5 a week, pensioners would pay £1, others might pay £9. In 2.5 years, they would gather £37.5 million. £2.5 million would run the operation, leaving them £35 million to help recover the company. The caveat was that it equated, or should equate, to a share issue, a truly cooperative venture. The problem was that the several trusts involved couldn't agree among themselves as to how this might operate. So there's an incumbency on the fans to embrace the spirit of a cooperative venture, or even still, clubs in trouble or who wish to grow might consider other vehicles. Bruce Crawford, who regrettably can't be here for personal reasons this evening, went through with me today the initiative that has been developed by Dunfermline Athletic in creating Pars United, which is a corporate vehicle which was used to purchase 93.6% of the football club. this community interest company, a KIC, adds an ethical dimension to corporate law. It is subject to normal company law, but must act for the good of the community. There is an asset lock that prevents asset stripping and limits dividends, and also restricts directors' salaries. It's a shame that the banks couldn't be subject or converted to KICs. And there are other vehicles. I mean, Stirling Albion, for example, is fan-owned, and I won't rehearse all of the other teams mentioned by Alison Johnson. My personal preference is for community social enterprises that embrace the local football club and other sports, as is happening at Kilwinning Juniors, Stenhousemuir. One thing, Presiding Officer, is certain. Scottish football at a professional level cannot continue as it is. Now, even on a larger scale, if the Barcelonas and some of the major successful German clubs that have been mentioned can benefit from fan ownership, then so can Scotland's clubs.
Many thanks. Now Colin Liz Smith, to be followed by George Adam.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Could I not only congratulate Alison Johnson for bringing this debate, but also for your generous words about Margot MacDonald, because in her chairmanship of the cross-party group on sport, she proved that she was passionate about all sports, but I think there was something very special in her heart when it came to football. Across Scotland, Deputy Presiding Officer, I think there are few issues that provoke the same passion and the same strength of feeling as football. That obviously goes with the same media attention that it attracts, not always, I have to say, for good reasons and sometimes to the exclusion of other sports. But I think it's right that the Parliament does take the opportunity to discuss some of the finer points of what are complex and often controversial issues. And Chick Brodie is quite right in saying that something has to happen to mend the game in Scotland. This is a year, obviously, when we are debating hugely important questions about our constitutional future, but we are also debating our sporting identity. So I think this debate fits with the scrutiny that is required for that, and I hope this debate will prompt more about other Scottish sports in the direction of travel that we take in the future. Now, no one is under any illusions about the severity of the financial problems which threaten Scottish football. Great institutions such as Rangers, Hearts and Dunfermline have all been brought to the very brink in recent years, and despite the tremendous efforts of supporters, staff and some administrators, I think it still remains to be seen as to whether they will all make it fully back into the black in the way that was possible before. Because financial mismanagement of varying degrees has been at the heart of these troubles, and many similar cases in England. Some clubs, in the pursuit of glory on the pitch, have broken their wage structures and they have lived far beyond their means. And I thought John Mason, although he's no longer in the chamber, made an important point about what could be written into constitutions. Others have been subjected to ruinous decision-making by owners who, quite frankly, have considered clubs to be their own fiefdoms or perhaps personal playthings. And so I think that there is a serious issue there. And I think on that point it's fair to say that the footballing authorities in both Scotland and England have had too relaxed an attitude when it comes to club ownership. We all know the names that are involved, but there are some who have sought to dominate the clubs from top to bottom. And they've made false promises by doing that, and they have cut and run when the going has got tough. So whilst I welcome the SFA's decision to oblige Scottish clubs to investigate potential new owners, it shouldn't really have taken until 2012, when the full extent of these problems in some of our biggest clubs had already emerged before that rule was passed. To be effective, regulation has not only to be enforced, but it must be ahead of the curve and anticipating the problems before they actually arise. Two members who've just spoken have said just how much the fans matter, and they do. And I think football has a much greater chance of success if it responds to that. Because they've been unimpressed, very unimpressed, by the lack of integrity and transparency that has gone with that. And I think the only way to counteract that accusation is for tougher regulation. As it stands, 4 of our 42 SPFL clubs are already in community ownership, a figure that I think will soon rise, and in many ways that is a very refreshing change. And I commend the passion and the drive of the various supporters groups who have stepped in and opened their collective wallets during very troubled times. We must be careful, however, not to demonise all the individual owners, because I think there are people who are doing their level best to ensure that they make their clubs much more stable with shrewd ownership, and that they are looking at much more prudent financial planning. And I think that there's a happy balance between that. Alison Johnson has raised some interesting debates about community ownership. You've compared that with some other interesting debates across Scotland about what community involvement can mean. And I think that is an interesting claim that we have to take a careful look at as to whether the common will is perhaps better than that of some individuals. But I also think we have to be very careful that we don't disrespect the rights of some individuals in that. So I think there's a happy balance to be seen. So just to sum up, I think the best way to ensure that our clubs are run soundly is to vet much more stringently those who wish to take charge of them. The process needs to be much tougher and the footballing authorities much more transparent. But above all, I think we have to pay heed to what the fans want and what they are saying, and to ensure that there is much greater integrity and transparency in Scottish football.
Thank you very much. Now call on George Adam to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I also thank Alison Johnson for bringing this debate to the Chamber, and congratulate the new Cabinet Secretary in Sport. Presiding Officer, you may or may not be aware, but I am a proud Paisley buddy. I may have mentioned that on more than one occasion in the past, but I think I've kind of got away with it up until now. But I remember one time, years ago, a previous employer who I absolutely infuriated at the time asked me, is there more to George Adam than I'm a St Mirren fan, I'm from Paisley, and I'm in the SNP? And I said to him at the time, add my wife and my 2 children, and you've pretty much got exactly what George Adam is. Now, I'm proud of that, because I am proud of our great town, and I'm proud of the history of that town, and I'm also proud of our football team. It's not easy. It can be extremely difficult and challenging. We only win a trophy every 25 years, but boy, when we win a trophy, does the town celebrate. One town, one team, one big party. In 1926, we won the Cup. In 1959, my dad and my grandpa saw the team winning the 59 against Aberdeen. In 87, I was there to win the Scottish Cup with my own family and my father as well. And I have obviously brought up my own children in the belief that St Mirren is the only true local team for you to support if you come from Paisley. And James and Jessica, my wife, and I celebrated with the whole town last year when we won the Communities League Cup. Now, St Mirren and Paisley go together. You know, it's not just the club were founded in 1877, and they were actually named after the patron saint who founded the town and part of with the Abbey in Paisley as well. But it goes even further than that. The colours of the club, black and white, come from the black and white cart which flows through the town of Paisley. And I think that to me sums up a team like St Mirren, a community club where their colours come from 2 rivers that flow through the heart of the very town. And I think that's one of the things that makes me proud to support my local team as well, because they are an important part of the community. They're involved in many projects locally, street stuff where they help play street football with areas of where there's problems, hotspots with antisocial behaviour, which they've done very well with over the years. They've won more awards than actually the football club has over the years with that actual community spirit. And there's also been the St Mirren Independent Supporters Association, which has been going since the late 1990s. And that was a very difficult time for the club. And they took a different route. They decided that they were going to try and participate in the board, but they wanted to create money to support the board and support the club during these difficult times. And going to the stage at one point, actually buying a player, Stuart Keane from Ayr United for £10,000, which some people might have said that wasn't such a great decision. But that is the problem. When you talk about that type of decision, that's the problem with supporters' trusts as well. Because as I said to Chairman of St Mirren recently, I don't know how he can do it as a supporter. My heart and head get all completely mixed up when it comes to my football team, and logic goes out the window. So we have to be extremely careful when we're talking about supporters' trusts and how we set them up. I personally believe that for a club like St Mirren, it is the way forward. It is. I know St Mirren have been for sale now for a couple of years. The current board who saved the club and have done so well are actually saying that they will make sure that St Mirren will go into an ownership that will make sure we retain that secure future. But that always there's that fear factor with fans when they know their club's for sale, and we always are worried that someone might come in. There has been other attempts to look at a trust within St Mirren, a more complicated one, which was quite difficult, was originally talked about a year or 2 years ago, and it was just something that wasn't as democratic as what we would regard as a fans trust here as well. So I think for future for clubs like my own, I think there are many different forums we've heard. I don't think any two clubs in Scotland have the same form of fans trust, the ones that are actually owned by fans. So I think there needs to be a flexibility. There needs to be a way where I personally think for my club it would be a good idea to have a fans trust that owned the club, but then there would be an elected board. I think that's the Barcelona model, where effectively you could use all your expertise and people who have possibly been involved at that level and train people up to be able to look after the club as well. So I think, yes, it will be challenging for clubs like St Mirren, but I do believe that fan ownership is the way forward, but we need the flexibility to ensure that what's right for one club may not be right for another area as well.
Many thanks. Now call on Neil Findlay to be followed by Graham Day.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I'm glad George Adam mentioned St Mirren. I was really surprised that he mentioned that, of course. But I'm glad he mentioned it, since it was my old classmate, Danny Lennon, who's the manager there and who delivered that trophy. I remember never being able to get the ball off him at PE. But as someone who played football, watched it and supported it all my teenage years, into my 20s and 30s, and then occasionally can be seen playing for that fine band of athletes in the Parliament football team, I must admit to recently having fallen out of love with the game. I think we can all look back with nostalgia and rose-tinted glasses at bygone days, standing on terraces, frozen at the bone, using toilets that were knee-deep in something. But in my view, those days were a bit more honest. Those days were a bit more grassroots. There was a bit more enthusiasm then, I think, for the game, because I think the game of today is very different. At the highest level, we see a real chasm between the fans and those on the pitch. We've seen All-Seater Stadium introduced for absolutely good reasons following the desperate events at Valley Parade and Hillsborough, and I look forward over the next year or so to seeing justice for the 96 being delivered. But those changes sapped much of the atmosphere from the game, whilst when we look at the salaries being provided to often less than average players, that builds a further gulf between supporters giving up their very hard-earned and often low pay to see their team and the players who can earn more in a week than many do in a year. And of course, I accept that this is not the case across the whole of football. In the lower leagues, especially in Scotland, I would pay tribute to the smaller clubs and the junior clubs and amateur clubs and Sunday League. Their committees, their communities, the people who keep them going, they are the real heroes of football in Scotland, not the prima donnas we often see on our TV. In relation to ownership, it's often only out of adversity that we see issues of fan ownership emerge. That shouldn't be the case. If we look at clubs in Scotland who are or are moving towards community ownership, most have done so out of major financial problems. And I look forward to the day when we see one of our big teams or one of the big English teams take this approach, not out of financial necessity, but to build the operation that they're in cooperation with the fans, who are absolutely central to the development of the game and the sustainability of clubs. When we have a Celtic or Rangers or Chelsea or Man City leading by example, welcoming the community approach, then we will see a better atmosphere at matches, more community development, players closer to the fans who pay their wages, and I think a better game all round. We know that these models exist in Germany, Spain, Greece, and I was very surprised to see that every club in Argentina operates under that model. I don't think it's done them any harm, given their World Cup record. Can I say, finally, today's events and the sacking of David Moyes, I think, is an example of all that is bad in football, and it saddens me greatly, and I think things must change or we will get into further trouble.
Many thanks. I now call on Graham Day to be followed by John Finney.
Thank you. Presiding Officer, during 30 years in sports journalism, I saw up close a variety of forms of football club ownership, the good, the bad, the downright disastrous. And that experience does convince me that ideally, genuine, broadly based fan ownership, where practical and deliverable, is desirable. That said, we should not lose sight of the fact that some of the worst implosions involving Scottish clubs have involved genuine supporters, albeit individuals who made their fortune displaying considerable business acumen in other fields, securing control of the teams they have supported from childhood and making a pig's ear of it. Determined to awaken the sleeping giant or turn their club into challengers to the established order, they leave that business brain at the door of the boardroom as they enter it, blinded by genuine affection for the team and in some cases revelling in the ego trip which can be football club chairmanship, they blunder on, ignoring the warning signs. It's said that the only way to make a small fortune from owning a football club is to start with a large one. But historically in Scottish football, all too often the money concerned is borrowed and flushed down the drain. As players are brought in on unsustainable contracts and managerial teams brought together then dismissed in pursuit of the elusive cherished prize. And it isn't always a single individual who oversees such a spectacular collapse. At Dunfermline there was a board of successful business people, all of them supporters, that led the club to the brink of oblivion. It's worth noting that Dundee's second flirtation with disaster came with fans' representation on the board. The collapse of football clubs is horrendous for everyone caught up in the situation, from the creditors, especially the wee local businesses, to the young players cast on the scrap heap, the office staff, the senior pros with mortgages whose contracts are shredded. It's awful. But no group of people, in my opinion, suffers more than the fans. The emotional ringer, as the administrator, as they invariably do, paints the bleakest possible picture and tells the supporters, it's up to you supporters to save the club. If you care, dig deep. It's terrible. And the emotional blackmail goes on and on. We've seen it in a variety of places. So absolutely, let's look carefully at expanding fan ownership. It does tend to offer a greater degree of sustainability. And I say that with confidence because it's tried and tested over more than 100 years in Scotland. We seem to talk about supporters' trusts and community ownership as if this was something relatively new. In essence, it isn't. Brechin City in Angus has operated as a members' club since 1906. The Glebe Parkers don't have a board, they have a management committee elected by the season ticket holders, a la Barcelona, if you like. Right now, look at the Division 1 table. Brechin might not seem a great example of how well this sort of setup works. But this is a club which, from a town of a population of just 6,000, has done remarkably well down the years on the field. And in the late David Will produced one of the finest administrators European football has ever seen. And in the part of Angus that I represent, the only senior club, Arbroath, are to all intents and purposes still a members' club. OK, 10 years ago they became a limited company, but the 300 shareholders are all fans of the club. And again, while seemingly doomed this season to relegation to the bottom tier of Scottish football, the Red Lichties have in the not-too-distant past plied their trade just one level below the top flight. So the type of model highlighted in the motion does work, although I'm not entirely sure about the right to buy as proposed. And if I may, a couple of words of caution. Running a football club at any level takes an enormous amount of work, and you need an appropriate level of experience of the rules of the competitions.
Alison Johnson.
I thank the member for taking an intervention. Does the member agree that we can look at those clubs who have great experience of community ownership models, from the Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund and so on, to establish what you need to have in place to ensure that there is a sustainable, sound future to avoid some of the situations you described earlier?
I think that's true, Presiding Officer, but I think we have to look at the practicalities on a low level in Scotland. And I was going to make the point that you do need an appropriate level of financial restraint. I think, as John Mason rightly touched on, you also need a thick skin in reality, because it's one thing standing on the terraces or sitting in the stands, giving those who are running your club pelters, convinced you could do better. It's quite another dedicating the hours required to take the job on yourself and then deal with the folk you used to stand on the terrace with, telling you where you're coming up short and how they could do a better job. But good on the fans who are prepared to take on the responsibility for the clubs they love and making sure they live within their means and are around for many years to come. And in conclusion, if I may say so, Presiding Officer, good on Alison Johnson for securing the opportunity for Parliament to discuss this topic.
Many thanks. Now call on John Finney, after which move to the closing speech from the Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I too would like to congratulate Alison Johnson for bringing this debate here, and indeed the Cabinet Secretary on your new appointment. I would also like to refer members to my register of interests and the various references to Heart of Midlothian Football Club therein. I think there's different sorts of communities. There's geographic communities and there's communities of interest. People talk about local clubs. My local club is Lochaber Camanachd Shinty team. The football team I support is the team that my father supported, Heart of Midlothian. I come from rural Lochaber and a real affinity with the land, and that's expressed in ways that wouldn't necessarily be meaningful to anyone not from the area. So people would talk about where the deer go, the big rock where we used to play, where old Davy lives up the glen. And there are significant issues of land ownership in the Highlands, which I think have similarities with this topic we're discussing here. Dougie MacLean in the song Homeland has a line in it, "Now you've bought a little piece of something that you don't understand and you've misunderstood." The other community that I belong to is the community of Hearts fans, and if I see things like Fozzie on the fence, Tommy Murray sitting in the ball, Robbo's 27 goals, it paints a vivid and exciting picture for many. It's meaningless to non-Jambos, I suspect. Like my colleague in the front here. I have to say there was outrage when a previous owner of our club changed the badge, and there was outrage when there was an abbreviation used in the socks that didn't reflect the abbreviation that the fans used. So again, yes, sir, you may have paid good money for it, but it will never belong to you, and I think that's an attitude that fans have. So I am a member of the Foundation of Hearts Fans and various other groups who have combined together. I have 2 lots of shares. Now, that's my only dip in the waters of capitalism, both of them with Heart of Midlothian, not a lucrative deal, as you would imagine. 2 lots of shares, 1 certificate. That's because the second lot of money was appropriated by presently a fugitive from justice, shall we say, to pay the tax. And I think it's important you pay the tax. So they have 0 monetary value, these shares, but clearly they have a big emotional value. Foundation of Hearts is a not-for-profit organisation which was created in 2010 by a group of lifelong Hearts fans, and their objective is to have a shared, and I quote, "We have a shared and passionate vision for the future which is based on bringing Heart of Midlothian back to the people who are truly passionate about this wonderful club, the fans." And the foundation was joined by various other groups and has been supported by Supporters Direct, and we are ably supported by our chair, Ian Murray MP. Now, Supporters Direct, and Patricia Ferguson mentioned earlier about the cooperative movement. The Supporters Direct help fans to set up democratic cooperatives known as Supporters Trusts, with express purpose of gaining influence and running and ownership of their clubs. And under the frequently asked questions on their webpage, why we exist? We exist because we are needed. The game can be better run and should be more responsive to the needs of its fans and local communities. It's not just, there's a number of clubs that have been mentioned here, and genuine football clubs, Dundee Football Club, Dunfermline Football Club have been in difficulty, and I know fans from my club helped them out, and the same is true. Ross County fans travelled free of charge to the game in Edinburgh on Saturday, courtesy of the generosity of their club. They had a whip round in every bus and made an extremely generous donation to the club. There's a warmth across farms, and the motion talks about being responsible. I think fans would abide by the rules, the state's rules. Taxes would be paid in time. Local suppliers would be paid on time. Staff would be paid in time. Staff would be respected. Customers would be respected. And they certainly would abide by the football's rules. The thing I would say about all the trauma associated with these fans, the fans never cheated. Individuals may have. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the various models, and I hear the wise words from Graham Day of caution. I think these are words that every group considers when they consider fan ownership. But they are the words that would have been said to the Assynt Crofters. You can't do it. They are the words that would have said to people, Nile of Egg, Nile of Gia. And these are very, very positive examples of what can be done. In closing, the Federation of Hearts' objective is to ensure a stable financial future where all funds generated by the club, Foundation of Hearts and the fans, are reinvested in the club. That's responsible, sustainable and stable. I'm grateful that we've had the opportunity to discuss the motion. Thank you.
Many thanks. I call on Shona Robertson to close the debate. Cabinet Secretary, 7 minutes or thereby, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. First of all, thanks to Alison Johnson for securing this important debate. I'm sure Margot would have approved. Thanks also to very kind comments from across the Chamber, and also very positive contributions to this debate. As others have said, I'm sure everyone here today agrees that football clubs at all levels play an important role in communities across Scotland They are often an important local employer and contribute towards employment in the local economy through the local suppliers and are therefore a key local economic driver. But beyond this, they're also often recognised as a central community asset that helps bring people together to celebrate and at times commiserate performances on the pitch. And I thought George Adam, in his description of St Mirren, captured that very well in terms of what the club means to the town of Paisley. So a successful and sustainable football club, and of course other sports clubs as well, not always just football, bring people together from all walks of life in a common purpose and help create and maintain strong communities. Football is therefore more important than simply the sport itself, and therefore we have to do everything to protect that while ensuring the voice of the everyday fan is heard. We recognise as the Scottish Government the importance of that, and that's why we actively support the principle of developing fan-based ownership through our funding of Supporters Direct Scotland. SDS has been instrumental in supporting and advising football clubs on fan-based ownership models, but this advice is not just provided at times of crisis, and I thought that Neil Findlay made an important point there that it shouldn't just be at times of crisis, but they provide advice to all clubs looking to develop and grow, and that's very important. Members are aware that there are already 4 clubs, Dunfermline Athletic, Stirling Albion, Clyde and East Stirlingshire, in community ownership in Scotland, with several other clubs, including Motherwell, Ayr United, Annan Athletic and Heart of Midlothian, well down the road of introducing some form of fan-based ownership or community interest company. I also very much welcome, and as others have done, the recent move from on Hearts, and the fact that the offer from Anne Budge and the Foundation of Hearts has been accepted. I think that's very good news, allowing the club to move a step closer to coming out of administration. Football today is no longer just about generations of families following their team and the ups and downs that go with a lifetime of devotion and support. There is a strong commercial dimension that demands strong individuals and influential decision makers capable of leading clubs towards success on the pitch and delivering long-term sustainability of that success. And I thought Graham Day made that point, that the expertise is important in today's environment, and but that's not incompatible with fan ownership, but it is something that needs to be borne in mind. The landscape is changing, and it is becoming clearer that in order to survive and thrive, clubs need to be more transparent in how they operate, how they're governed and how they engage with and listen to their own fans. It's not necessarily true that all fans want to actually be involved in the running of their club. Some will, some won't, but they do want assurance that it is being well run, well managed, properly governed and adequately financed in order to allow the team to perform at the highest level on the pitch. A strong financial baseline is therefore essential, but as we've seen from some recent high-profile cases, there's still a lot of work needed here in Scottish football. And that's why I'm pleased to announce today the establishment of an independent working group that will look at how we can increase and improve fans' involvement within football clubs. The group will be chaired by Stephen Morrow, a well-respected senior lecturer in sport finance at the University of Stirling, and will have representation from the Scottish Football Association, the Scottish Professional Football League and Supporters Direct Scotland. And of course the chair will be able to appoint others as he deems appropriate. The plan is for the group to meet for the first time next month and to report its findings and recommendations to me later this year. Of course, we'll look to inform Parliament of that also. More details will be available in the next few days of the make-up of the group, and I know that there will be considerable interest, not just from the football world, but the political world as well in the group's work over the coming months. Good governance and accountability, together with a strong partnership approach. Yes, of course.
Alison Johnson.
Thank you. I welcome your announcement of the supporter involvement group. Can I ask, will the Cabinet Secretary and the Government ensure that this group have an ambitious mandate and that you will be prepared to look at any more radical recommendations that they might bring forward in time? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to rule anything in or rule anything out, particularly. What I want them to look at is how good governance and accountability, together with a strong partnership approach involving fans, can work. Now, that might not be one size fits all, and I think what we've heard tonight is that actually probably one size doesn't fit all, and there are different models. I think what I'm keen to reach is a consensus about what the barriers are and how we can remove those. Now, that may be legislative, it may not be legislative, it might be about rules, governance rules, but I'd rather the group take forward that work and then come up with recommendations that will allow us to genuinely move forward. So I'm certainly happy to keep members up to date of the progress being made there. The structure of clubs and regulations is already complex. We don't want to further complicate things, and I think that's something else to bear in mind. So before any proposals for change are made, whatever those end up being, they must be fully considered by all parties, and I'm sure that Stephen Morrow and the working group that he will chair will ensure this is the case and will take soundings and listen to the views of fans and other organisations in doing so. I think it's fair to say that the financial future of our football clubs cannot be taken for granted, that we have to ensure that any proposed changes don't threaten or discourage future investment in something that is so precious to fans and communities across Scotland. However, I do believe that with the right people around the table and the expertise of some of the clubs already that have gone down this route, that we can get to a better position. So thanks again for your contributions tonight.
Many thanks. And I now close this meeting of Parliament. Thank you all.